The fluorescent lights of the downtown Chicago bar flickered like a dying heartbeat, casting jagged shadows across the sticky wooden floor. It was a Friday night in late October, the kind where the wind off Lake Michigan cut through jackets and tempers alike. At the far end of the counter sat a woman no one noticed at first, petite, maybe 5'4", with a faded denim jacket and hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her name was Riley Kane, and she hadn't come here to drink. She'd come to disappear. But disappearance wasn't in the cards tonight, because 3 men, loud, drunk, and emboldened by cheap whiskey, had decided she looked like easy prey. The first slap came fast. A meaty hand cracked across her cheek, snapping her head to the side. The bar went silent. Glasses stopped clinking. Even the jukebox seemed to choke on its own song. The man who hit her laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "What's a little thing like you doing out alone?" He sneered. His friends howled. Riley didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just touched her lip where blood had begun to bead and looked up at them with eyes the color of winter steel. And in that moment, every veteran in the room felt the air change. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button now, because what happened next would become legend. In dive bars from San Diego to Bangor, whispered like a ghost story with a body count, Riley Kane wasn't just some woman. She was a ghost herself, former Navy SEAL, one of the first women to earn the Trident, callsign Reaper in the teams. She'd done things in Fallujah and Helmand that would make grown men wake up screaming. But that was another life. After her last deployment, she'd vanished into civilian obscurity, haunted by the faces she couldn't save. Her brother, her spotter. The kids caught in crossfire. She'd come to Chicago to drink herself numb, to let the city swallow her whole. But the city had other plans. The man who slapped her, his name was Derek Voss, worked construction, had a rap sheet longer than his arm, and thought the world owed him respect. His buddies, Travis and Mike, were cut from the same rotten cloth. They didn't know that the woman they'd just assaulted had once taken down a Taliban cell with a broken knife and a prayer. They didn't know she could kill them in 12 different ways before they hit the floor. But they were about to learn. Derek grabbed her wrist, twisting hard. "You gonna cry now, sweetheart?" Riley's voice was low, almost gentle. "Let go of me." Travis laughed and shoved her shoulder. "Or what? You gonna call your boyfriend?" That's when the bartender, a grizzled ex-Marine named Hank, reached for the phone under the counter. He'd seen that look before, in mirrors, in deserts. He knew what came next, but before he could dial, Riley moved. Not fast, not to the untrained eye, but to the 2 off-duty cops nursing beers in the corner. It was like watching a cobra strike. Her elbow drove into Derek's throat, collapsing his windpipe, just enough to drop him gasping. Travis swung a wild haymaker. She caught his arm, pivoted, and used his own momentum to slam his face into the bar. The crack of bone on wood echoed like a gunshot. Mike froze, bladder loosening in his jeans. Riley stood over them, breathing steady, blood dripping from her split lip. "You should have walked away," she said. And then she did. But this wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning, because Derek Voss wasn't the kind of man who let things go. He had connections, shady ones, a cousin in the outfit, the remnants of Chicago's old mob, and pride. That was his currency. Within hours, word spread through back channels: find the girl, make her pay. Riley knew it the second she stepped into the cold night air. She felt the eyes on her before she saw the van. Black, unmarked, idling across the street. She didn't run. Running was for prey. Instead, she walked straight into the shadows of an alley, pulling her hood up, letting the darkness cloak her like an old friend. The van followed. 3 men piled out. Same crew, now armed with bats and brass knuckles. They thought they were hunters. They didn't know they'd just stepped into a kill zone. Riley had chosen the alley for a reason. Narrow. 1 way in, 1 way out. A rusted fire escape overhead. She melted into the darkness the way she'd been trained: breath control, foot placement, heartbeat slowed to a predator's rhythm. Derek led the charge. Coughing still from the bar, rage twisting his face into something inhuman. "You're dead, bitch," he roared. The first bat swung wild. Riley ducked, came up inside his guard, and drove her knee into his groin. He folded like wet paper. Travis tried to flank her, but she was already moving, grabbing a broken bottle from the ground, slashing across his forearm. Arterial spray painted the brick wall. Mike panicked, swung the brass knuckles. She caught his wrist, twisted until something popped, then headbutted him so hard his eyes rolled white. 30 seconds. 3 men down. Sirens wailed in the distance. Hank had called it in after all. Riley vanished before the first cruiser turned the corner. The next morning, Chicago woke up to a mystery. Security footage from the bar had gone viral, grainy, but clear enough. The headline screamed across local news. Mystery woman takes down 3 attackers in seconds. The internet exploded. X was a war zone. Hashtag Find Her trended nationwide. Some called her a vigilante, others a hero. The cops wanted her for questioning. Derek Voss lawyered up, claiming self-defense, but the bruises on Riley's face told a different story, and then the twist came. A retired SEAL commander, now a pundit on cable news, saw the footage. His face went pale. "That's Kane," he muttered on air. "Reaper Kane." Thought she was dead. The name hit like a bombshell. Military forums lit up. Old teammates crawled out of the woodwork. Riley Kane wasn't just a SEAL, she was a legend. The woman who'd carried her wounded. Spot her 3 miles through enemy territory. The one who'd taken a bullet meant for a child in Mogadishu. The Navy's ghost, but legends don't get to rest. Derek Voss's cousin, a mid-level mob enforcer named Marco, put a bounty on her head. 50 grand, dead or alive. Chicago's underworld stirred. Riley knew she couldn't stay. She packed a go-bag cash, burner phone, a K-bar knife older than most of the kids hunting her. But before she left, she had one stop to make, the VA hospital on the south side. There was a kid there, 19 years old, both legs gone from an IED in Syria. She'd promised his mother she'd check in. The kid's name was Jamal. He idolized her, even though he didn't know her real story, just that she'd been there. She sat by his bed, held his hand while he cried about nightmares. "You ever feel like giving up?" he asked. Riley looked out the window at the gray sky. "Every day," she said. "But then I remember the ones who didn't get the choice." She left him her trident pin, the one thing she'd kept from the teams. For when it gets dark, she told him. That night, the hunters came. Marco had tracked her through hospital cameras, sloppy but effective. 4 men this time, professionals. Ex-military, judging by their movement. They cornered her in the parking garage, Glocks drawn. End of the line. Reaper, Marco sneered. Riley smiled for the first time in years. "You brought guns to a ghost fight." The lights went out her doing, a flick of a breaker box earlier. Darkness swallowed them. The first man never saw the knife. The second took a knee to the spine. Marco fired blind, bullets sparking off concrete. Riley was already behind him, garrote wire around his throat. "Tell your boss," she whispered. "Some debts don't get paid in blood." She left him choking, took his phone, and walked into the night. But the real storm was just beginning, because Marco worked for someone bigger. Vinny Russo, old-school mob, the kind who still believed in respect and retribution. Vinny didn't care about bounties. This was personal now. His nephew Derek was in ICU, jaw wired shut, pride shattered. Vinny put out the word, bring him the woman's head. And he had resources, cops on payroll, hackers, drones. Riley was one woman against a machine. She needed help, and help came from the unlikeliest place. Hank the bartender had been more than just a Marine. He'd been force recon, and he'd kept in touch with the old network. Within 48 hours, Riley had a team, not official, not sanctioned, just ghosts like her. A sniper named Doc from Ramadi, a breacher called Tiny who could hotwire anything, and a hacker, Sparrow, barely 22, who'd once taken down a cartel's banking system for fun. They met in an abandoned steel mill on the outskirts of Gary, Indiana. The air smelled of rust and regret. "This ain't about revenge," Riley said, voice flat. "It's about ending it." The plan was surgical. Hit Vinny where it hurt his money, his reputation, his family. But first, they needed bait. Riley walked into a Russo-owned club downtown, alone, hands up. The trap sprung. She let them take her. Zip ties, black hood. A ride to an old warehouse on the docks. Vinny was waiting, silk suit and cigar, flanked by a dozen men. "You've got balls. I'll give you that," he said. "But balls don't stop bullets." Riley's hood came off. She looked him dead in the eye. "I don't need them to." That's when the lights died again. Doc's sniper round took out the generator from 800 yards. Tiny breached the side door with a shaped charge. Sparrow killed the cameras, looped the feed. Chaos erupted. Gunfire. Screams. Riley snapped her zip ties on a thug's face, took his pistol, and moved like death incarnate. Vinny ran. Cowardice looked ugly on him. Riley chased him through the warehouse, past crates of smuggled guns, over bodies of his own men. She cornered him on the dock, Lake Michigan black and endless behind him. "Any last words?" she asked. Vinny spat blood. "You think this ends with me? You're marked? Forever." Riley holstered the pistol. "I've been marked since Kandahar." She didn't kill him. Instead, she zip-tied him to a pylon, left him for the cops with a flash drive full of his financials courtesy of Sparrow, enough to put him away for 3 lifetimes. The warehouse burned behind her, evidence consumed in righteous fire. The aftermath was quiet. Too quiet. The news called it a gang war. The Fed swooped in, arrest made, headlines faded. Riley's team vanished back into the shadows. She went to ground in a small town in Montana, bought a cabin with cash, adopted a dog named Sarge. But the story wouldn't die, because Jamal the kid from the VA had kept her trident pin, and when a reporter came sniffing around the hospital, he showed it to her. The pin had a serial number, traceable. The reporter was tenacious. She found Riley. Knocked on the cabin door one snowy night. "The world needs to know what you did," she said. Riley looked at her, then at the fire crackling in the hearth. "The world doesn't need another war story," she replied. "It needs fewer wars." But the reporter wouldn't let it go. She published anyway. Not the violence, the humanity. The kid who'd lost his legs but found hope. The bartender who'd stood up. The ghosts who'd protected one of their own. The video went viral. Not the bar fight that was old news, but the truth. Riley Kane, the SEAL who'd walked away, who'd saved a city without asking for thanks. Donations poured into veterans' charities. Jamal got a prosthetic that let him run. Hank reopened his bar as a safe haven for vets. And Riley? She stayed in Montana. But every year on the anniversary of that night in Chicago, a package arrived at her door. No return address. Inside, a single trident pin and a note, for when it gets dark, from ghosts she'd never meet, because that's what SEALs do. They carry each other, even when the world forgets. The screen fades to black, the firelight from Riley's cabin, the last thing you see. And then my voice, soft but clear. That's the story of Riley Kane. A woman who reminded us that some people you don't touch, not because they'll hurt you, but because they've already survived hell. If this moved you, drop a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments from which part of the country are you watching this video.